Have you ever thought to yourself, I think I want Autobattle in Genshin Impact? Well, for the low price of 4 Archons, that is almost somewhat possible. Furina really is the magic ingredient here. She is not only a huge source of raw damage, but she's also applying the off-field hydro, allowing this team to do hyper blooms without doing anything. The only requirement is that you mark enemies with Nahida, and that really isn't much. You might be asking, what about Venti? Can Venti fit in this all Archon team that does nothing? Well, almost nothing. No, he really can't, because if you put Venti in there, you either don't have Hyper Bloom anymore, or you don't have Zhongli's shield, both of which are relatively important for this team to be anywhere near viable, because while this is a fun team, it is certainly not a meta team. A fair disclaimer, my 4 Archons are C2. Raiden is going to be an elemental skill bot, so her C1 and 2 are both going to contribute nothing. Zhongli is only going to be using his held version of his skill, so his will also be contributing nothing. Nahida's first 2 constellations are going to be increasing the damage of this team a fair bit, but nothing too game breaking. Now Furina's is where things get a little bit complicated. Her C1 and 2 are both immensely powerful constellations, but due to the fact that this team has no actual innate healing except for prototype Ember equipped on Nahida, they're really not going to get much of an opportunity to shine, but I will be starting with stacks thanks to C1, and what little healing or damage I do get is going to be amplified by the C2, making her overall damage a lot more impactful than it otherwise would be, but the ceiling is much higher if this team had actual healing. Roles and breakdown. Raiden Shogun is an elemental skill bot built for pure elemental mastery, going up to 1000, a pretty round number, equipped with Dragon's Bane for just an elemental mastery stat stick. Nahida is equipped with a prototype Amber to offer at least some small amount of healing to this team, because otherwise it has basically none unless I switch Furina to healing, which I'm never going to do, because that is sin. Zhongli, just your standard HP build, except with a little bit more damage thanks to his Staff of Homa. And Furina with her standard Golden Troop build for personal damage, as well as having C2R1. This is going to be where most of the team's damage comes from, except for the Hyper Bloom reaction itself. Now to put it in practice, in the Overworld, of course, this is going to stop everything, because Overworld enemies are practically a common cold away from the grave. Honestly, most things are going to die before you can even activate everyone's elemental skills and mark them with Nahida before Furina's summons just kill everything, because the Overworld is weak as piss. Okay, now let's turn it up a step and let's go into an artifact domain, the Fontaine one, because it's got a pretty healthy balance of enemies. Not that any have elemental shields or anything, but that is an enemy to the low APM lifestyle. This artifact team with a normal domain, god damn it, I am messing this up so much. This artifact domain with a normal team usually takes about 25 to 30 seconds, somewhere in there with my usual teams being Nuvolette or Risley these days. So if this can clear anywhere near that team time, that's not too bad. So getting a time here at about 40 seconds, that is not half bad for doing almost nothing, like the bare minimum. So let's step it up again and go to a world boss, this time the Primo Geo Vishap. This boss boasts no real mechanics that you need to do, just nothing but a punching bag, as many people use it for, to test out damage of new characters. So why not test out this team, because, well, again, he has no mechanics really. He's got a couple things that you can do to make him take more damage, but who cares? All we care about is things that stop us from doing damage and make us press more buttons, because who the hell wants to do that? We are trying to not play the video game here. Obviously, so far, this is not the fastest kill around, but again, you can speed it up if you wanted to auto attack with Nahida or burst with Raiden, or, you know, actually use my Furina's burst. It's just kind of setting off cool in here, but who cares? The boss is dead and you barely did anything. So of course, we're gonna kick it up again and push this to the limits. Can it kill a weekly boss? Well, the answer, of course, is going to be yes, but just how long is it going to take down this thing? And don't worry, I will save you the extremely boring fight and just skip to the end with the timer on the screen. Okay, this took a little bit of time, but given that Ajda has a lot of stupid iframes that eat up a lot of your time, that is going to be factored into this, and I have to run away because Zhongli's shield does have its limits. So let's go to where there is a time limit. Can this clear half of the floor 12 Spiral Abyss? For this run, a double Hydro Yoimiya comp is going to be handling the first half, which is a good team, but it's nothing insanely meta that's going to give the all Archon team way too much time and be a little unfair. Also, the input tracker on the left side of the screen crashed, and it's just kind of gonna show that one thing the entire time. There's also one crucial thing I forgot, that the second chamber is filled with Rift Hounds. And well, you know, this team doesn't have a real healer, and I absolutely refuse to put Furina into healing mode. I did decide to try to power through and just face tank, but that proved fatal for poor Nahida, and without her, this whole thing really just falls apart. Okay, so I gotta restart, but I do firmly believe that the second half with no elemental requirements other than Hydro is the perfect side for this team to be on. I really do not want to fight that seahorse with this team because I don't think they'll be able to take down that shield in any reasonable amount of time with just hyper blooms alone, and not even an overwhelming amount of hyper blooms. So I'm going to stick with this half. I'm just going to have to run around a little bit more and, you know, increase my APM, which does hurt the overall goal of this team to just stand still and let everything die. But, you know, Rift Hounds got to make it work somewhere, especially when Furina is already draining everyone's health. I don't need the Rift Hounds to have a stationary target to just stack up their corrosion on. That is exactly not what this team needs. So eventually, after enough running around and playing with the spicy puppies, eventually we get to the Pyro Abyss Mages. Now this is a really easy point, but the Hyper Bloom isn't really going to help here, so it's a lot of just sitting around and waiting for Furina summons to basically take down their Pyro shields and allow them to be killed. Okay, so of course I'm going to speed this up, because look, this concept of this team isn't exactly the most interesting gameplay in general. It's more interesting to see, hey, can this actually do it? And look, it can. Chamber 1, done. On to Chamber 2, and this one is a boss fight, and honestly, this is probably going to be significantly easier than a bunch of spicy puppies for this team. 1, corrosion isn't hurting me, taking away Furina's bonus damage and putting poor Nahita's life at risk. 2, this is a Hyper Bloom team. That means I have exceptionally strong single target, especially with the help of C2 Nahita buffing up those Hyper Blooms. And as you can see, this is actually going down at a pretty fast rate. These bosses are dying relatively quickly. You can also see just how hard Furina's summons are hitting. I really can't overstate just how impressed I am with Furina's personal damage. Her buffing capabilities are a little bit more easy to quantify. You can see just how strong her damage percent buff is on paper and be like, yeah, that's going to do a lot. Her personal damage is definitely helping out a lot here, but it's the fact that these 4 characters work so well as a passive Hyper Bloom team that is the real magic here. And they cleared this chamber with ease, so on to the last one. Here we have yet another boss chamber, and that one is probably going to be one of the best situations for this team, so unfortunately it's not really like this is going to be the absolute best stress test. God, I'm just messing up today like crazy. This is still the hardest content in the game in terms of, you know, just putting you on a timer and making you have to build somewhat competent teams. So to be able to throw a team that its whole purpose is to cast as few abilities as possible, only using 2 of my team's elemental bursts and renewing some long duration skills whenever they drop, that is pretty impressive to be able to do this at all. I honestly wasn't sure if they'd actually be able to clear these chambers in time, but look how much time is left on these clocks. I really do believe that somebody, if they threw an even more meta team in the first half and they just had C0 of all these Archons with honestly really bad weapons on them and just a properly EM belt ride, and they would be able to clear this with this kind of team just as easily as I have, obviously in just a little bit longer time. It's kind of crazy how such a low APM team can actually take out everything so efficiently. Now again, yeah, I have constellations. I'd be interested to hear if you have this kind of team to try it out, because people have always been memeing about an all Archon team, but this one is way better than it has any right to be. Now obviously, if you actually actively play it, use more bursts than I am using, then it will be even better. And if you want to have C6 Zhongli and take advantage of the healing, finally we have something that can. And I've crapped on that constellation a lot, but this is actually a legitimate use for it. In any case, thank you to you for watching. Thank you to my members, my patrons, for supporting me as always. You guys are the best. This team is hilarious. Try it for yourself if you want to auto battle and Genshin Impact, and I'll see you in the next one.
Attaboy!